And I thank you for the words that you're going to speak through her. And I pray that your Spirit would move among us. And I pray that you would bust us out of any little shell that we're stuck inside right now. And I pray that that you would free us up to be to be us, to be the us you created us to be. And Lord, I pray that we wouldn't be building walls around our hearts, but that we'd break those down, that we'd invite you in. Soften our hearts, break us apart if you need to, and just move in us and through us. And I pray that you would radically speak through Suzanne. And we just open ourselves up to hear your words from her. In Jesus' name, amen.
Situated here. Okay. I want you all to picture something with me. Okay? We're going to go back to 2004. There was a boy and a girl. And said girl invited said boy to her church. And said boy brought his said friend. And this girl wanted him to sing, and his friend to sing with her. And her sister, actually, who's here today? My sister, Natalie. Thanks for coming, Natalie. And so I've been really, this girl was really liking this boy. I know, I kind of gave it away. We're just, forget you heard that. This boy or girl was really liking this boy. And so inviting him to her church, this is a good thing, right? Like, okay, this will be good, we'll get to sing together and it'll be great. And so then, so after, the singing went great, said girl and said boy were talking, and a topic came up about a really good singer. Southern gospel singer, you may know, heard of him, David Phelps. Okay. How many of you have heard of him? Really? I'm surprised. I'm a little shocked. Okay. Anyway, he was in the Gaither vocal band. Okay. So he was a really high singer. Anyway, okay. So they were this young boy and girl were talking, and said boy was pretty quiet, and so when this conversation came up, and he was like, yeah, he actually has a new CD out. Like, I really want to hear it. And said girl had a moment presented to her where the options, and this may not make sense to you, but in that moment it made sense to this girl. She was thinking, my option is I can say, I've never heard of this, his CD, or I'm going to lie and say that I have this CD, that I've listened to all the songs, and I think it's great. And so, in that moment, I just knew, said girl knew that I wanted to create a connection, even though it was based on a lie. All right, you're all waiting for it. Wait, maybe. Is this working? There we go. That, my friends, is the first picture of Ryan Kellum and Suzanne Dreher. And the story was, yes, our first conversation was definitely built on a lie. I'm not saying you should, but that moment I went home and I said, Mom, you got to take me to the Christian bookstore. I got to buy a CD. And I scrounged around for money because I knew she wasn't going to buy it for me. So scrounged around for money. That day I listened to every song. And then, because he wanted to borrow it. And so like this will be that thing that'll keep us connected. Like it'll give us something to talk about. That's funny, sorry about that. So to this day, it's a funny thing. We have, that was like the first, again, I don't think lying is good. Only if it makes you look good. Oh, I'm just kidding. No. So I lied. So why did I lie? I lied. I wanted to make myself look better than I actually was. you had to lie or to do certain things for someone else and honestly for God. That's what we're talking about today. I wouldn't recommend lying, but if there's something you could do, would you do it? To make you appear better than you are, or to do more things, acts of serving, to make you appear better to him. And I'm gonna just throw a truth bomb on you. Let's see it. God doesn't need us. God doesn't need us to serve him. He has everything he needs, and yet we are told by God to serve him and him alone. Why? Does God have an inferiority complex? Is he sitting in heaven feeling unloved and unappreciated? Does God have a deficiency in his character that he feeds off the service of human beings? I don't think so. Acts 17 makes it clear that God is served by human hands as though he is not served by human hands as though he needed anything, for he made all things. So God doesn't need our worship. Instead, God delights in our worship and service of him because we have the most joy when we are worshiping and serving him. God wants us to have joy, and joy comes through worship and service to God. Now, on the other side, misery comes through worshiping and serving something other than God. All right, let's turn to our Bibles. We're going to go to Mark 4. Wait, I was going to ask what book we're going to. I was going to test you.
Too late.
Mark. We've been in there for about 27 weeks. Just kidding. It's been great. Mark 14. We're going to start at verse 1. Maybe 30 seconds. Still hear pages moving. All right, starting at verse 1. It was now 2 days before the Passover and the feast of unleavened bread, and the chief priests and the scribes were seeking out how to arrest him by stealth and kill him, for they said, "Not during the feast, lest there be an uproar from the people." And while he was at Bethany in the house of Simon the leper, and as he was reclining at a table, a woman came with an alabaster flask of ointment of pure nard, very costly. And she broke the flask and poured it over his head. There were some who said to themselves indignantly, "Why was the ointment wasted like that? For this ointment could have been sold for more than 300 denarii and given to the poor." And they scolded her. But Jesus said, "Leave her alone. Why do you trouble her? She has done a beautiful thing to me. For you always have the poor with you, and whenever you want, you can do good for them, but you will not always have me. She has done what she could. She has anointed my body beforehand for burial. And truly I say to you, wherever the gospel is proclaimed in the whole world, what she has done will be told in memory of her." Then Judas Iscariot, who was one of the 12, went to the chief priests in order to betray him to them. And when they heard it, they were glad and promised to give him money. And he sought an opportunity to betray him. So, we're looking at two characters. These 11 verses, it's all about, we introduced two characters who couldn't be any more different. One is named Judas. The other is a woman whose name is not named. One loves and worships Jesus, one does not. One is happy with Jesus, and one is miserable without him. And we will get more to these people in a minute. But I first want to kind of talk about where we are in the book of Mark. Things are starting to heat up, and the roller coaster has arrived at the peak of the track. From here on out, the pace will pick up quickly. 3 years of traveling, preaching, teaching, casting out demons, and healing is coming to a close, and Jesus is heading directly toward the place of his death. And if you remember, a couple weeks ago or last week, Ryan was really referring to when Jesus looked and was heading back towards Jerusalem to his death. The faraway future is becoming a present reality, and everything is about to change. And as Jesus is getting closer to fulfilling his mission, things begin to separate. It becomes very plain who is on his side and who isn't. And it may come as a shock that the guy who attracted thousands of people will finish the last leg of his journey almost completely alone. Verse 1 and 2. It was now 2 days before the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and the chief priests and the scribes were seeking out how to arrest him by stealth and kill him, for they said, not during the feast, lest there be an uproar from the people. Now, we know from early on in the scripture that Jesus had already taken on his opponents in a debate and absolutely mopped the floor. They were humiliated, undone, embarrassed, and defeated. And so at this point, the religious leaders are done. They're done talking to him. They want him dead. They want his lips to stop moving. They want to see his body bloody and lifeless. They just wanted to do it as soon as possible. But now was not the time. This was the time of the Passover. The Passover was and still is a Jewish holiday celebrated every year in the city of Jerusalem. It was meant as a celebration of the first Passover in Egypt in the book of Exodus. If you don't know that story, I'm going to give you a little recap. God told Pharaoh to let his people go free from Egypt. He wouldn't do it, so God threatened to kill every firstborn male in Egypt. Pharaoh didn't listen, and that's what God did. But he provided a way for his people to escape from this judgment. If they slaughtered a lamb and smeared the blood across the doorposts of their house, the angel of death would pass over the house, and the firstborn male would be spared. Every year, the Jewish people celebrated this custom, but this year was going to be different. This year, the firstborn of all creation, the very Son of God, was in Jerusalem, and this Son would become the lamb that is slaughtered so that God's judgment would pass over us and land directly on him. This was the Passover to end all Passovers. And I know it sounds weird and out of date. Sometimes when you think of slaughtering a lamb, like, can you just picture yourself like killing a lamb, which I could not do, and then taking like something like a paintbrush. That's what I'm thinking. Like, you put a paintbrush in their blood and just wipe. I just think it sounds gross, honestly. Just to throw that out there. I just think it's gross. I think I would do it if I needed to, but I just think it sounds gross. But this is exactly what everyone in the world is still doing every day. Everyone has created their own rituals in hopes that God would pass over their imperfection. Some people go to church. Some people give to charity. Some people take really good care of their grandkids. Some people work their tails off so that their family is provided for. Everyone on the planet feels a sense of obligation to be the best they can be and avoid doing things that would make them liable to judgment or criticism. We have all created our own Passover ritual, whether we like it or not. And what Jesus is about to do is make a statement to the world. There is nothing you can do to satisfy God's demand for perfection. You are guilty, you are imperfect, and only Jesus can change that. Nothing and no one else can. So don't try harder. Stop trying so hard. Don't slaughter more silly sacrifices. Receive Jesus' sacrifice of himself for you. Okay, so if you're thinking back, the religious leaders had none of these things running through their minds. They had a one-track mind. They wanted Jesus killed, and they knew they needed to be sneaky about it. The people were crazy about Jesus, and the religious folks were crazy about people, so they bided their time for the right opportunity to present itself. They wanted to catch Jesus by stealth. The word stealth refers to catching someone with bait. They would need some bait to get Jesus, and they were about to find the perfect guy. Who was that? Judas. Just making sure you're awake. Pop quiz. Okay, but Jesus wasn't quite ready yet. He was still on the fence regarding Jesus. His mind was still in limbo, but the next thing that happened would send him over the top. So going back to verse 3, now we're at the house in Bethany. And while he was at Bethany in the house of Simon the leper, he was reclining at a table, and a woman came with an alabaster flask of ointment of pure nard, very costly, and she broke the flask and poured it over his head. So Jesus and his disciples are in the outskirts of Jerusalem in the town called Bethany. And not surprising, Jesus is in the house of a leper, or probably a former leper, named Simon. Lepers were rejects, misfits of society, but this was a leper that Jesus had brought into fellowship. Jesus is always breaking the trend. I love that. He couldn't care any less how much money you had in your wallet, how many bad habits you have, how friendless you are. He likes to set his affection on people who appear to be unlovable and untouchable. And he's been proving it for the past 3 years. And as much as religion has made God out to be a holier-than-thou prude, Jesus is showing us that his holiness changes and overwhelms our brokenness, not the other way around. In the house of Simon the leper, there is a woman who is unnamed. Now, as a general rule, women were not welcome in fellowship with a group of men unless they were coming to serve food. This woman was not coming to serve food. She was coming to serve Jesus. And Jesus knew this, and Jesus wasn't interested in keeping up with cultural norms. He was much more interested in changing culture completely. Jesus had a very high view of women because Jesus created the first woman, Eve. And when God created Eve, God created her perfect and perfectly. But sin has a way of distorting things and messing things up. And this includes cultural norms regarding the relationship between the sexes. But what I love that Jesus does here, he is not bending to cultural norms. He is thinking back to creation. He is recreating the world and relating the world as the world was intended to be. That is why he is healing people, raising people from the dead, telling demons to get lost. Jesus is bringing things back to the way they were in the garden, and that is what he is still doing today. And the way he does it now is through his people, the church, Big C. We don't do marriage according to culture. We do marriage according to God's original design, not just a relationship between a man and woman, but a vibrant, growing relationship centered on Christ. We do parenting according to God's design, not however the culture does it. We don't do retirement like everybody else does. We don't do sexuality according to the world, and so on. Jesus is a trendsetter, not a trend follower. And that is precisely what the church is called to be. So this woman walks up to Jesus with an alabaster flask of pure nard that was very costly. She breaks it and pours its contents onto the head of Jesus. Now, a few things need to be said here. First of all, this was so costly. This ointment was in fact worth about a year's salary. So if you make about $40,000 a year or $80,000 a year, this would have been a whole year of work being poured onto the head of Jesus. In this day, women usually could not find well-paying jobs, so it is very likely that this was actually a family heirloom passed down to this woman. She had decided that this would be the day her most valuable treasure would be used. The second thing is she used all of it. Once this flask was broken, it could not be resealed. To break it was to use the entire thing. It's like opening a bag of chips or a can of pop. You know this. Once it's open, you got to use it because it doesn't stay good. Third, this ointment seemed to have no practical benefit. There are some things that you can buy that you can use over and over again. I mean, like a car. That's like a super simple example. But this wasn't a practical gift like a new donkey or a chainsaw or something. Okay. I just wrote things that came to my mind. Okay. This was ointment that was only to be used once. And once it was gone, it was gone. There wouldn't be anything to show for it. So I have a box that is super valuable to me. And I actually brought it with me today. I just as an example, I think some of us have boxes or it doesn't have to be a box, but something that holds so much value in your life. Maybe not monetary, but just it just holds value. I'm going to set this down here. Okay. So this is my box. It even has dust on the top. You can just tell. I haven't opened this box up in years. It sits on the top of my closet. So what this box represents to me, and as I have, like the longer or the older I get, the more this box represents the change that God did in me. I'm just going to share this with you here. there's a stone, says Nevea Joy Kellum, always in our hearts. So, the day we lost our precious baby girl, this is her box. This has ultrasound pictures. Oh man, it has cards, and I'm sure it's from you all. I kept them. Has a journal that I bought, and I wrote letters to her following the days. Man, so I just haven't opened this in a while. I mean, this precious, if you don't know part of our story, one Sunday morning, I was 4 months pregnant, and in our house, I labored the day before and lost her on Sunday. I mean, I held her in my hand. She was about that long, hands, feet, legs, head. So, this box is precious to me. Then my question, and I think some of us, if Jesus came to me and asked, "Can I take this from you? Can I take it?" I would not forget her and what's in this box if I let Jesus have it, but it would be hard. It would be hard. This represents who the change in who I've become because God was with me every step of the way. So, really, all I wanted to say, what do you have that's like this in your life? Do you have a box that is carrying something? And if someone asks, if Jesus asks you to let me have it, you're not going to get it. You're not going to get it back. Would you let him take it? So. Oh. Whew. I waited until I didn't open it until just that minute. I wanted to feel that. And again, I'm not saying you should or shouldn't. I wanted you to think about that. What does that do in your heart? Okay. So we go back to it's expensive. It's no practical benefit. So as you can imagine, all of these thoughts were running through the minds of the disciples as they watched in horror as the ointment came running down Jesus' face. They knew that once the oil was gone, it was gone. All they saw were dollar signs. Can you imagine if you were at the gas station pumping gas, and instead of putting it into your car, you just poured it on the cement? Just let it go. Like not $20, like thousands of dollars. No. I mean, that just. So I'm sure the disciples were thinking, what is she doing? What is she doing? So they did this knee-jerk reaction. So why was the ointment wasted like that? For this ointment could have been sold for more than 300 denarii and given to the poor. And they scolded her. Now this is tricky to navigate because it sounds like they really care about the poor. Like they really care about the poor. I think the human heart can be crafty and shifty. And even in our best moments, we can reveal just how corrupt we really are sometimes. The disciples are not indignant or angry because the poor are not being taken care of. They are angry because they believe that Jesus was not worth such an expensive gift. This is the eerie, almost unrecognizable voice of religion. And religious people are always repulsed by true worship. Religion replaces relationship with service. It begins with service and then never moves beyond service. Worship begins with relationship that moves to service. Doesn't that make sense a little bit? Okay, so another example is I had, say Ryan called me from church, okay? And he said, I really need something from the store. I mean, I would probably, I need something from Cabela's. I need something from Cabela's. Now that's really out of my way. That's a really long drive out of my way. But if he really needed it, I would do it. I'd probably scoff the whole time. Like, why in the world am I doing this? But I would go do that because Ryan and I have a relationship. I know that he's not going to ask me to do something like a joke, like for a joke. Right? Right. So our act of worship begins with a relationship, and then moves to service. The married women here in this room, when we made our vows to our husbands, they most likely went something like this: I, so-and-so, take you, so-and-so, to be my lawfully wedded husband, to love and protect you always, and so on. Blah, blah. There's a good chance that your vow did not say, I promise to always do the laundry, and to let you keep your socks wherever you drop them, and to help you make a 10-pound meatloaf, because we always have to bring that up. No, those things, maybe not specifically those things, were implied in your commitment to love and protect. But what happens is when we experience a slow drift from relationship toward duty and a sense of ought, the relationship is replaced by service. And we tend to feel good about ourselves, right? Because we are doing our duty. We're doing our duty, but relationships are not fueled by service. Relationships are fueled by love. And then that love leads to service. And then if you are feeling convicted, just stop by on the way home today and get something for your special someone. That's fine. Because you're not doing this out of duty. Because you remembered, oh yeah, that person I love. Remembering the relationship results in the right activity. The disciples are getting all of this turned around and ignoring the relationship. Okay, so Jesus hears the disciples grumbling, and he steps in. Verse 6. Jesus said, leave her alone. Why do you trouble her? She has done a beautiful thing. For you always have the poor with you, and whenever you want, you can do good for them, but you will not always have me. Now, anytime Jesus is sticking up for you, you're doing something right. You're doing something right. This woman is doing something beautifully right. She is loving God with all of her heart, soul, mind, and strength, and Jesus is commending her for it. It's not that Jesus doesn't love the poor. Jesus does love the poor, and he's proven it. But there is something even higher. The highest command Jesus gives is to love God with all of our heart and our soul and our mind and our strength. That love or that relationship fuels everything that follows. If that isn't established, there is nothing you can do that will please God, because God doesn't need your service. And that's a hit on our pride. I mean, it is for me. So there's nothing so you would rather me talk to you, Jesus, than to just go give my stuff away without a heart behind it. We can't do much. In fact, we can't do anything apart from him. Imagine a little boy at the ocean with his father. Little boy is collecting seashells for his dad, and his dad accepts them and says, thank you. Now the dad knows that he could go and get all the seashells he wants, and he could probably pick out better ones. How many of you have received that picture that, not just your child, but a young person drew for you that just, let's just be honest. But you know that deep down, they drew that for you. For you. And so you know that in order for a child to be able to do that for you, that says something about your relationship. So imagine then what it's like for God. He created all the shells on the seashore. Ephesians says that God prepares good works for us to walk in. He scatters the shells out on the shore for us to go and collect and to give to him. John 15 says he is the vine and we are the branches. And apart from him, we can do nothing. We are his workmanship. Service must begin with relationship, or else even good things become a distraction, or worse, an idol that keeps us from pure worship. True worship says, God, all I have is yours. Even the things I bring to you, you first put in my hand. And so God accepts our measly offerings because we are his son or daughter, not because we offer him such cool things. The truth is, Jesus really didn't need the ointment. He would have been okay without it. The mission would have been accomplished without it. But this woman wanted to give this gift to Jesus. The gift was given out of her love for Jesus, not her sense of duty. And it was this act that drove Judas over the edge. Nothing drives religious people more batty than seeing someone pleasure in worshiping Jesus. Someone take pleasure in worshiping Jesus. Another example I wanted to share with you. Imagine, a boss. A boss hires 30 workers. They're all working hard, right, until lunch and then take a break. Well, one of the workers decides to go and have lunch with the boss. Even more, he brought a lunch for the boss, okay? So the worker goes up to the boss's office, and there they sit for like 2 hours. I mean, who takes a 2-hour lunch break? Me sometimes. Okay. And there were windows, so all the other workers could see what was happening. They were laughing, they were smiling, they were telling jokes, they were having a good old time. So how do you think the workers that were watching this responded? I mean, come on. Sometimes, when people go into like the boss's office and they're in there for a long time, you're thinking like, are they like getting fired? Or are they getting a promotion? They don't deserve a promotion. I'm guilty of that. Like if you think about those things. So I would probably be a little ticked, and I'd probably be a little indignant, like the disciples were. That other worker, did he step out of line, or maybe not? Well, for me, I think that's a picture of the gospel. The rest of the world works their tails off for the man upstairs they've never met. We walk into his office and have a 2-hour lunch break with Jesus. And at the end of it, he says, let's do this again tomorrow. And after a while, you come to work more and more excited, not to work for your boss, but to spend more time with him. And I am concerned that there are a lot of people in our church and in our world who have put their nose to the grindstone in hopes that the boss will be pleased with them. And the problem with that thinking is that you can never do enough. God's pleasure in us is derived from his pleasure in the Son. The perfection of the Son has been given to us, and now we can step onto the floor of the factory again, and the boss would still call us friend. I thought about this, and I'm like, okay, I can hear an objection. But Suzanne, what about good works? Aren't we supposed to be doing stuff for God? Yes. But it isn't for God. It's through God. It's by God. In God. Because of God. And the disciples are still not getting this. And one day, they would get it. Once God secures our relationship with him, that is when some amazing activities begin. And honestly, that's why I'm excited here about our church. Our identity and who we are as a church is becoming clearer so that our activity becomes greater. Now, Judas did not get this and will not get this. This is how he responds, verses 10 and 11. Judas Iscariot, who was one of the 12, went to the chief priests in order to betray him to them. And when they heard it, they were glad and promised to give him money. And he sought an opportunity to betray him. So have you ever asked the question, what in the world is Judas's problem? I do some, like when I'm thinking about this, I'm just like, why was he so, it just always seemed like he was never there. He was never where everyone else was. He saw Jesus do ridiculously awesome things, and he just couldn't get himself to believe it. And why is that? Is there really money that Judas is after? And honestly, I don't think so. I think Judas now understands that he will never be able to bring himself to worship Jesus. And he says, if I can't worship him, I will see that no one else does either. Judas represents a slow drift away from Jesus. And if you pinned him down and asked him, why did you do it? I don't think he would say, I just didn't believe it or it was false. I think he would say, I just couldn't bring myself to worship him, or it was time to move on. And that becomes the core of the gospel. Admiration may or may not lead to worship, and at some point, Jesus will do something in your life that makes your head spin. Sorry. And when it's done spinning, you will either say, yeah, he is the real deal, or nope, he is not for me. Judas's head has been spinning for 3 years, and now he is coming to the conclusion, he is not for me. So today I want to end with 2 points. The first one, do you see yourself as pouring out worship to God or as holding back worship from God? And basically I'm just asking you, are you being stingy with God? Are you stingy with your worship and your time and your money and your abilities and your heart and your talent? If your life could be contained in a bucket, is your bucket tipped over, or is it just sitting flat and motionless? If it's sitting there flat and motionless, the problem is in your heart. It's a heart problem. You are not yet convinced that Jesus is worth you giving him whatever you have. We always give the most to the thing we value the most. What is Jesus worth to you? And the second one is, worship of God is not idealism. It is about reality. Notice what Jesus said about the woman's gift. She has done what she could. Not everyone will go to overseas and translate the Bible. Not everyone will take their last few breaths in martyrdom for Jesus. It doesn't matter. There is no greater or lesser form of worship. Worship is worship, and everyone is capable of worshiping God with whatever resources they have. The same can be said for us corporately, too, as a church. You know, we don't have $1 million. That'd be cool. Could do a lot of good works with $1 million. But if our heart's not right, it's worth nothing. You know, we got a lot of fingers and toes and brains in this room, and together we can do a lot more than we can imagine. So let's give God everything we have right now and not wait until we think it's time. So my final question for you today, what is Jesus worth to you? For the unnamed woman, he was worth everything that she possessed. For Judas, he was worth 30 pieces of silver.
Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you, Suzanne. Suzanne's going to sing a song, a special, because that's what she does. She likes to sing. So. But it's also going to be an altar call time. As I was listening, I think that what happened in my heart was I realized that I've got issues. Anybody else with me on that? I'm like, man, I got some heart issues. And I don't know what your issues are, but we've all got them. And I just appreciate the call to make a real connection with Jesus again, and make that the priority, to abide with Jesus. And everything else matters not, but through that only and that alone. One of my biggest issues is I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. Anybody ever thought that thought before? I'm not good enough. That's mine. That's what I'm going to take to the altar today. And I thought I'd be vulnerable and share that with you. I'm not good enough. And it's paralyzing. It's paralyzing because I'll never be good enough. And just the moment that I think I am, then my pride gets chopped off at the knees again, and I find myself kneeling. And so for me, my prayer is that my shift would be not trying to be good enough, but just being God's son. You know, and I love the image of because we do have some awesome drawings at home, right? the crayon drawings that know that Brielle, we have a whole stack of stuff from Brielle's school in preschool. Good work for her age, right? But the point is that we love her so much that everything that we get from her means the world to us. And that means God's heart is probably better than mine. And so he receives my not good enough and says, wow, you're amazing. I love you. So that's what I'm going to the Lord with today. She's going to sing a song appropriate to the message. And while she does, we can use the altar so you can be in your chair, but just be vulnerable with yourself. And then we'll do the song and then we'll close. But be vulnerable with yourself. My issue is maybe not your issue, but we've all got issues. No, we do. I want us to be able to reconnect again, like what you were talking about. So, Chris, I've got the song prepared on Spotify. We didn't go over this beforehand, but there's only one track on the Sunday morning playlist, so that'd be the one. And so, Suzanne, I want to thank you again. It meant a lot to me that you shared today. And I think you touched our hearts a little bit. Touched mine anyway. And so, thank you.
I'm going to sing a song. It's called Alabaster Box. It's really precious to me, and as I was preparing, I'm like, oh, I think I want to sing that song. So here it goes. Still, as she made her way to Jesus, she stumbled through the tears that made her blind. She felt such pain, some spoke in anger, heard folks whisper, there's no place here for your kind. Still, oh, she came through the shame that flushed her face, until at last she knelt before his feet. And though she spoke no words, everything she said was heard, as she poured her love for the Master from her box of alabaster. And I've come to pour my praise on him like oil from Mary's alabaster box. Don't be angry if I wash his feet with my tears and I dry them with my hair. You weren't there the night he found me. You did not feel what I felt when he wrapped his loving arms around me. And you don't know the cost of the oil in my alabaster box. I can't forget the way life used to be. I was a prisoner to the sin that had me bound. And I spent my days, poured my life without measure into a little treasure box I thought I found. Until the day when Jesus came to me and healed my soul with the wonder of his touch. So now I'm giving back to him all the praise he's worthy of. I've been forgiven, and that's why I love him so. eyes on him like oil from Mary's alabaster box. Don't be angry if I wash his feet with my tears and I dry them with my hair, my hair. You were there the night he found me. You did not feel what I felt when he wrapped his loving arms around me. And you don't know the cost of the oil. Oh, you don't know the cost of my praise. You don't know the cost of the oil in my alabaster